Welcome to this episode of Blended TV. I'm your host, David Rafuse, and today on this episode, we are joined by Dr. Nikole MacLellan, a.k.a. Dr. Kokes. You can also find her on Instagram under the handle sportsdoc.kokes. She is a naturopathic doctor down at Proactive Health and Performance in Dartmouth. She is also the host of the Offseason Podcast and the founder of the Glass Line Project, which helps young female athletes pursue excellence. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Nikole MacLellan. And I always need to say this because I think most of us know you as Dr. Kokes. You told me where this came from. I don't think most people that work with you actually
know why they're calling me that. Yeah, that's fair. When I was born, my brother couldn't say Nikole, so he always called me Coco. And like principals at school would call me Coco, and my parents would always call me Coco. If I was in trouble, it was Nikole for sure. But yeah, as it evolved and as I got older, it turned into Kokes. And then I was thinking kind of as I graduated, I worked like a lot with athletes and stuff like that. How do I stick out in this industry? And nicknames are huge in sports, right? So I kind of stuck with Kokes, and then I got married too, so my last name was gonna change, which I haven't done yet, so I should probably get on that at some point. But Dr. Kokes evolved, and it seemed to be like a pretty great marketing tool as well.
Great. So Dr. Kokes is a naturopathic doctor, and talking about preventative healthcare, I mean, this is your world.
Definitely.
So tell me a little bit first about what a naturopathic doctor is.
Yeah, sure. So that's like a really varied question, I would say. A lot of practitioners, like in most spaces, practice really differently. In my world, naturopathic medicine is really trying to dig at the root cause of things. So oftentimes in conventional medicine, we're given medications to alleviate symptoms, but we're not really fixing why the symptoms happened in the first place. So that's kind of what I do every day. I ask lifestyle questions, I ask training questions, I ask questions about you literally head to toe and try to figure out what's going on with you and how we can help.
I love it. So when we look at proactive and reactive healthcare, I mean, ultimately that's what we're kind of talking about. Reactive healthcare is just basically the distribution of medications to fix problems that you currently have, and then proactive is to hopefully prevent them in the first place. So if you were to explain proactive healthcare, is there how would you do that?
I think like one of the best examples that I've ever used is when I was a dietitian. I was at Halifax Rehab Facility, and I was having patients with double leg amputations from diabetes complications, and I'd go give them Canada's Old Food Guide, which if you guys know that one, it's horrible basically. And this is the tool as a dietitian that I had to educate people around food. And I would get to these clinic beds and they'd be like 2 liters of Coke next to their beds after a double leg amputation, you know? So this is so far past when we have to intervene that I just felt useless at that point. So with the preventative aspect and proactive approach, like educating people now about their bodies and hopefully getting it into like the younger ages too, of trying to educate why food is so important, why exercise is so important, and then getting them before they get to the point where it's chronic illness. Naturopathic medicine does actually work with a lot of chronic illness, but sometimes just putting a Band-Aid on these things or taking medications for these things isn't really fixing the problem. We have to change your lifestyle to be able to manage conditions.
So it seems easy enough.
Yeah,
exercise
no
and
problem.
nutrition.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't know if you can get much more simple than that, but it's not easy.
Nope.
So how do we, as an industry here in the fitness and health industry and yourself, how do we make these changes for people that are coming to see us and looking for the help? Because, you know, we've talked about this a lot. Most people to a certain degree already know what they should and shouldn't be eating, at least to be healthy. And I don't know many people that don't know that they should be exercising or moving more often.
Yeah.
So where are we stuck? What do we do?
I've struggled with this my entire career so far, even as a dietitian and as a naturopathic doctor. And I initially blamed myself for it a lot. I took a lot of self-criticism and say you're not doing enough, you're not helping enough, you're not saying the right things. And a lot of introspection goes into that, and I get better as I grow and learn from people. Everyone that walks in the door, I learn something from. And I think I'm not sure if I would consider this when I say athletes or performance management, it's been a really great transition for me in the space that I work in, because the people coming in the door are like chomping at the bit to get better. And even putting that delineation, like a lot of people ask, I'm not an athlete, but can I still come see you? And I say, well, like, are you willing to get better? Do you want to change things about yourself? And they're like, yes, this is what I want to be. This is all these things. And I think like, you know, you and I have had some pretty good conversations before too, talking about like really figuring out what it is people want and then giving them the correct information, tools to be able to get there, versus just the surface information that people give you. And then the information that you provide is very general, like drink more water, we know that, you know, eat good food, we know that, train more, we know that. But really getting at what they're looking for and what's stopping them from being able to get there is a large part of what I do.
Yeah. It's so hard to get people there, especially initially, because, you know, it's hard to get so comfortable with someone on the initial visit, whether it's seeing you or sitting down with me, to open up to that extent. So I find that that's oftentimes like a wall that we have to kind of break down initially. And then the second thing that we have to do is, I don't know if they even know what they want more often than not. And that's what we've talked on, you know, multiple occasions and going into great depth about is like, how do you truly dig into like the human behavior and understanding what they want? Because I've never talked to someone that wasn't like, Dave, I don't want to be healthier, right? Everyone wants to be healthier. They want to be more fit, but do they want to do the things that are needed in order to do that? Or more importantly, do they want to not do the things that they shouldn't be doing, if that makes any sense, but shouldn't be doing in order to get to where they want? What do you find the top 3 things, let's say, are that prevent people from making the progress that they want?
Yeah, kind of that initial one is really not knowing what it is they want. And that's tough. It's like, you know, that same concept of graduating high school and picking your career for the rest of your life. Like if you have been bombarded by this, you know, social media industry and all of the things that you're marketed towards are like, being a certain body fat percentage, having a 6-pack, having visible muscles all the time, like these are really hard to attain, and no one talks about that piece of things. Everyone's like, this is what you should look like to be healthy, right? So this false perception of what health is and what it's supposed to look like is really confusing for a lot of people. Another big thing is just, I think it's a lot of this all or nothing approach that everyone has, and it's a tough mindset. I find myself in it too, where if one day goes off the rails, then the week is gone, then the month is gone, and then I'll start again New Year's, I'll start again Monday, you know? So this behavior change has to be more of an adaptation versus like this all or nothing approach. And to convey that is really difficult for people. They're like, oh, today's shot, versus like having the cookie and then eating a really healthy lunch and supper, you know? And 3, I guess like, this fleeting motivation piece of things. People believe that there's some sort of willpower about things or this motivation that you're inherently supposed to have. And like the highest level of athlete wants wine, wants cake, there's no magical thing that they have that you or I don't. It's just what keeps us going on a weekly, daily basis towards what we're trying to achieve. And knowing what you're trying to achieve makes that a lot more possible.
So what do you think of this? I just did a podcast maybe 2 weeks ago on the pursuit of excellence, and it was referencing the idea of treating every month like January. So many of us see the change in years as an opportunity to reflect on the year prior and the year coming, but imagine looking at every month that way. I mean, very few people even make it through January before they lose some of these new habits or goals that they're trying to strive for. They might make it 75% of the way, but have you ever thought or talked to clients before where you've looked at it and breaking it down to the spectrum of the month and like starting February off, reflecting on January, reflecting on February only, and then setting essentially a New Year's resolution every single month?
I mean, like that would be kind of ideal, right? And then it all comes back down to like, I believe really understanding what you're trying to accomplish in that month. And I'm sure you see that too. If it's like, it has to be back to that basic kind of goal setting mentality of what is really realistic for it to happen in a month. Having the education as a practitioner to say like, hey, you can't lose that amount of weight in a month, and for it to actually stay off and be effective is really huge. So setting parameters and education around what is possible. doing small incremental change, we know for sure is better outcomes than transitioning everything at once. So a lot of January 1st failures are, I'm gonna change my entire life, right? And that's so hard to do. Like, I don't know anyone really that can just change everything and maintain it forever. And then the biggest thing that I see often too is this level of restriction with things. So if you restrict, it's human nature to want what you're not allowed to have, right? So I think incorporating like really intentional changes that don't feel overly restrictive, that kind of can blend in with your lifestyle, is what would be successful. And if we did that on a monthly basis, I mean, I think would be a lot more successful than what we're doing now. There's so many things that are happening right now, like no sex drives for people. Men are worried about testosterone all the time. This world that we're living in is bigger, stronger, faster all the time. People aren't sleeping. There's so many inputs that when we get to January 1st, we know we need some sort of change. We know we need some sort of motivation or something to happen, but we just don't know what it is or how to get there. And then making these changes in a crazy, stressed out, burnt out environment are so hard to do. And people think there's something wrong with them that they can't do it.
Yeah.
You know?
I think, and going back to like what people perceive they want and what they actually want, and even looking at some of the highest level athletes, I think the best example is actually Matt Fraser, who just announced his retirement this week. And there's an interview that he did, and I can't remember who it's with, and they were asking him, what if it wasn't for the games, would you change the way that you train? And he jokingly said, yeah, I train from an aesthetics perspective. And he grabbed his stomach and he's like, I'd get rid of this, knowing that he sits around 15% body fat or whatever it may exactly be, because that helps him from a performance perspective. Yeah. I see so many people walk into the gym and they're like, I want to perform. And then the next second it's, I want a six pack. It's like, do you want to perform or do you want a six pack? Because
they're different.
Totally different things.
Yeah.
So it's such a process to figure out exactly what it is that people want.
Yeah.
Burnout, stress, sleep. A side of it that is, I'd say, less publicized maybe. It's becoming more and more talked about, but something that is so important, whether you're male or female. Any tips there? I mean, I think that's something that most of us struggle with.
Yeah, I think like hierarchically, these are the foundations to things. So if you don't have any of these covered and you're trying to make radical changes to nutrition, I mean, sleep is a good night's sleep we see in research makes all the difference for your nutrition choices the next day. So what are we really trying to go after, and in what, where to pick these things up first is really, really important. And I think that's where like coaching comes in, and having support networks and having educated practitioners come in and say like, this is where we start because we're trying to get you here because this is what you're asking for. And then again, that really educated, informed information for them to understand, like, as you had said, a six-pack does not equate to optimal hormonal performance, and optimal hormonal performance probably equates with way better performance, right? So there's so many things that we're bombarded with, and like how to lose 10 pounds in 6 weeks or blah, 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 whatever that thing is. What happens after 6 weeks? Then you're just gonna start to put the weight on as you go back to these habits that you had before. So what is this like internal thing that we need to figure out? And I think it's very individualized for each person, but there has to be something that like keeps us going through things, and really understanding why we're doing what we're doing, I think is helpful for people.
This is a great segue to a post that you just recently made a few weeks ago. And this was probably one of my most favorite posts that you've made, talking about being the best at something. And basically that's what you're kind of referring to here, is like making that choice. But there's a mindset behind this. Address, like, what do you think about when you think about being the best, or like you were saying in the post, just being better, and that is a mindset.
Yeah, so I feel like I just make those posts, I record whatever I'm thinking that day, and I was really heavy on this one because most of the patients that I see, when we really pull away all of the questions and we get down to something, the sentence has something to do with I'm not good enough, or I'm not blank enough, you know? And when we think about the opposite of trying to prove that you are good enough, for me, and in my past, it really looked like excelling at everything, being the best student, being the best athlete, being the best of everything. And if I wasn't, that was continuation of proof that I'm not good enough, you know? So every single day I kind of set myself up for failure. every single day, if I was not the best on the ice, if I was not the best in school, if I didn't get the best grades, I retrained my brain to say, well, then you're not good enough, you know? So that mindset is so faulty and has like destroyed my brain for years, right? And then so slowly and surely I start to change those mindsets. And we know how strong neuroplasticity is. So the ability for your mind to change is so strong. So that mentality of trying to be the best all of the time, once you hit that best point, say if you ever were the best at something, like if I ever became the best female hockey player, I'm done. Something I love so much, well, I'm the best. Where do you go from there, right? So there's no opportunity for growth. And that mindset that you hit a plateau or you hit a level of complete mastery of something is kind of sad, I would say.
Yeah, and I think that mindset is relevant no matter where you are on your journey either. So if you are really at the upper echelon and you're kind of striving to be the best, or even if you're starting out, it's a matter of just like attacking the day. And when we look at preventative healthcare as a whole, or trying to work towards better health, better fitness, it's not something that just happens. It's a process, it's a journey, and falling in love with that journey is so important. Which takes me to the Offseason Podcast. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
No, nailed it. So I was kind of saying before, when I read Andre Agassi's book, Open, it kind of blew me away. So my whole sporting career, you just think, again, that best idea, like these are the best in the sport and you want to learn from them. And most of us emulate high-level athletes and how they got there, and we mimic a lot of the things that we do to try to improve our performance. And when I read that book, like he's, sorry, spoiler alert coming, you should definitely read the book though, like drug addicted at some points, loses his hair, tries to play with a wig on, like all of these things that this athlete goes through, and we had no idea. We just see an incredible tennis player, right? So with all of, and even Ronda Rousey, she lived in her car for a while. So when we get to these backstories of these athletes, it's fascinating how they accomplished what they did despite adversity, despite what we think is amazing, what's happening on the other end of things, how difficult it actually is to be an elite level athlete and what that takes to go into it. And I think educating, younger generations and even our generation of what it actually takes to be a pro athlete, or how much work that goes in the back scene of things, is huge. And then also each episode, I learned something amazing about someone and what motivates them, or what keeps them going, or how they eat, or how they train, or whatever they do to keep in top physical shape, or whatever supplements they take to, enhance brain function, or whatever they're doing, So it's just an adventure for me. I'm not really sure where I'm gonna take it, but I love the stories and I love doing it, and it's kind of like a passion project right now.
And there's a second project you're working on called is that the Glass Line Project?
Yep.
And it's very interesting. So you're specifically trying to target and work with younger female athletes. You work with both men and women,
yep.
But for this project, it's younger female athletes. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so growing up in sports, no one ever talked about periods. No one ever talked about the impact of performance. No one ever taught me about nutrition. No one ever taught me about supplementation. No one ever taught me risks of being, a female and how that could play into the sports that I'm doing. And I see so many women on a daily basis who have struggled with hormones, who have struggled with birth control, who have struggled with periods, have struggled with nutrition. And I think I love talking to them now, but imagine we could cut all of that out. Imagine we could take, 12, 13-year-olds just at puberty and teach them everything about their body and teach them how to perform with it, that they don't have to drop out of sport. Like, that's the largest age group that starts to drop out of sport, and we lose so much opportunity to educate and keep girls in sports. Nutrition is obviously a huge one. Most of the young female athletes, there's major changes that happen with puberty, with hormones that change a girl's body, and they start to put on belly fat, and they are terrified, so they overtrain and undereat because of that, and then that causes hormonal dysfunction, and then we start to see period issues, and then they're put on the birth control pill. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but there can be nutrient depletions and there can be impacts on their ability to perform based on that. Or we could be missing massive issues that we could address if they had a baseline of health, and we weren't putting on birth control on top of things. So I think the major point is education, for them to have a listening ear, for them to have some tools for visualization and calming down anxieties and all that sort of stuff, and having a good baseline to reach out if there's any further issues, you know?
So this is an online, virtual, basically education platform that you've created. How do people hear and learn more about it?
Yeah, definitely. So we are on Instagram at the glass.lion, or no, at glass.lion. Sorry, there's so many Instagrams I have now.
Riker will like tag it up here for us.
Awesome.
It'll be right somewhere.
Somewhere here. I think that would be the easiest way to reach out. And then we can send you all of the information based on that. And the cool thing about the program, I believe, is we've really tried to include parents, coaches, and trainers as well. So the girls follow one program for the 6 weeks and parents, coaches, and trainers follow another program for the 6 weeks. All similar content, but just at a higher knowledge level and cues for conversations and to educate parents, coaches, and trainers things to watch out for, warning signs, and also what they need to know to have really solid conversations with the girls.
Love it. Naturopathic doctor by day, virtual educator by night, and famous podcast host on the weekends. You got it going.
Maybe.
So people, you need to use your benefits. Go and see Dr. Kokes. Use them. They're there. Most of you have them already. Any final words?
Yeah, if you're struggling with anything, there's so many opportunities to help, and a lot of times we just kind of put things by the wayside and wait and wait and wait, and they don't get better. So come talk to someone.
Thanks, Dr. Kokes.
No worries.